In 1886, Johannesburg was a little mining town. Today, it's the economic and industrial heartbeat of South Africa. Cities all over the world change, evolve and transform. It's happening right now and will continue to happen into the future. How do you design for the future while correcting the past? Who knows what Joburg will look like in 200 years?
Spatial transformation is reshaping the way in which the city functions.
Apartheid planning was about division and separation.
And we need to undo the injustices of the past.
It's about bringing uses that can coexist closer together. It's a lot more efficient. It makes city living a lot easier.
You want people to have a quality lifestyle and enjoy going to work and coming back.
South Africa is a country that is aiming to redress the inherited imbalances of its apartheid past. A possible set of solutions are outlined in the National Development Plan. The principle of spatial justice, the principle of spatial sustainability, the principle of spatial resilience, the principle of spatial quality, and the principle of spatial efficiency. These are not the only way forward, but to get a better idea of what it is we're dealing with here, we must understand the parameters. What is urban space economy?
Well, when we talk about urban space, we actually talk about the fact that each and every activity in an urban environment happens in space. So whether it's businesses, social interaction, commuting, it actually happens in space.
And what's the main reason people want to be in that space?
It's full of fun.
A mix of different people.
Lifestyle to see.
The vibe.
The culture.
Everything is near, transport, everything. Really artsy vibe.
Joburg is the most places to get a job.
Because it's full of you can see the whole of Africa in one city.
Urban space economy refers to how we live our lives, from the spaces where we live to where we work.
The space relations determine the economic relations and the political relations of people. In urban sprawl, what is actually happening, the poorer people will stay further from the center of time from the suburbs or from where economic opportunities are. It therefore means space will determine whether that family or whether that poor person will be able to move up the social ladder.
This means constant transformation, adjusting to the needs and demands of an ever-evolving society. So what exactly is it that we want to transform and why?
Johannesburg is one of the world's youngest cities. It's got youth and energy and vibrancy. What apartheid really did was destroy much of that youth, much of the potential of the city by putting people into containers.
The apartheid legacy used a range of different methodologies in order to segregate people, but in order to do so from a policy perspective, it needed to manifest that spatially. And using where people reside was effectively the tool that was used to do so.
Communities broken down in racial groups, living in different parts of the city.
The traditional apartheid city in the model was obviously using infrastructure to separate people. So you have highways, transport systems, railway systems to keep race groups apart.
We've got very long commute distances, we've got very low densities, and we don't have a lot of mixed land uses.
It's a very inefficient city.
You could find somebody coming all the way from Vosloorus working in Kempton Park. That is a huge distance.
To undo all of that and to plan around that is not an easy task.
And the citizens, what would they want to change?
I'll definitely make a subway.
Maybe more green spaces.
The housing situation in Joburg is very poor.
10 people in one bedroom, imagine.
Every month,
more interaction in the city. Like, I know it's growing already, but like, I hope it moves back here more like aggressively.
That all sounds great, but long term, what's the Joburg we're trying to create now? Although Joburg has changed dramatically over the last decade or two, it is essentially still divided along racial, cultural, and economic boundaries. Many people still have to travel long distances just to get to work, or to school, even to see a doctor. We want to restitch our city and link the people who live in it to their jobs and link their jobs to where they live. Transit-oriented development is considered the option for Joburg.
Transit-oriented development is one of the most exciting new approaches to the restructuring of cities. It's been used very effectively in many parts of the world.
You get development along transit or along transport lines.
Taxi ranks, bus ranks, train stations, airports, any transit infrastructure allows you to cluster a particular type of land uses, but also to achieve much higher efficiencies.
You can start integrating social and economic opportunities along those corridors, and I think it's an efficient way of doing it.
Think about it, when you're in a station or when you're transitioning either between one mode of transport to another, you can do your nails quickly, you can do your hair quickly, you can grab your groceries on your way from home. Now imagine if your home was a walking distance to the transit infrastructure.
All of these things, although they sound fantastic, don't just happen on their own. Take a look at these middle-class consumption stats and then we'll examine what they mean for Africa. More than half the world's population will live in emerging market cities by 2050. Cities in countries such as China, India, Russia, Indonesia, Brazil, Turkey, Mexico and South Africa. There will be a steady decline in rural area habitation from 2020 and a significant rise in middle-class consumption from that year onwards in Asian countries. Approximately 460 million people in emerging market cities will enter the middle class between 2010 and 2015. South Africa's own middle class population will increase from 17 to 22 million during this time. Now, let's take a closer look at Africa's urbanization stats. In 2009, for the first time, Africa's total population passed the 1 billion mark. 40% of that number lived in urban areas. In 2000, Lagos had a population of 13.4 million people. In 2015, that number will be 23.2 million. In 2010, Kinshasa had a population of 8.7 million, and this number will increase by 46% by 2020, making it the fastest growing city on the continent. It's predicted that by 2050, more than 60% of Africa's total potential 1.23 billion population will live in urban areas. So how will cities cope with this massive growth? What are some of the key areas of change we need to be focusing on?
People are moving to places of opportunity. So our city is growing, our city is densifying. People might be moving into backyard shacks, they might be moving into inner city buildings, but they're moving there because they're closer to livelihood opportunities.
The idea of higher density, mixed typology, walk-up type environments being part and parcel of that spatial transformation.
If you look at the favelas in South America, I think the South Americans have lived with the fact that you can't 100% address the issue of housing. So what do? The favela as it is has water, electricity, provision for public transport. There's also parks, libraries. So I think if we could move towards that direction where we are saying, yes, we understand that we're not going to be able to build houses for everyone, but wherever you are, wherever you've settled, at least have the basics.
The important things in terms of planning is understanding where the city's integrated public transport network will extend itself to, how human settlements are then coordinated to be within those precincts. Obviously, it doesn't exclude issues around services and the other, but going forward in the city, they're going to play a very important role to be very closely integrated and interlinked.
As one area of debate then, how will mobility help move transformation forward?
I think mobility is a very critical issue when you're talking about sustainable human settlements, but when you're talking about spatial transformation.
Mobility is not a privilege, it is a right.
Think about your everyday life. Think what you do when you get up. Mobility is absolutely central to our lives.
Economically active and economically successful cities and towns have a proper transport system.
We really want to see public transport being able to help people to get affordably, quickly, reliably and safely to their places.
Mobility on the back of a mass transit system, a public transportation system, makes for a more efficient urban system.
And how do we leverage land use for inclusion and efficiency?
Assembling land is not an easy business.
We shouldn't just think about expanding the city, leveraging land by finding new land on the edge of the city. We've got to intensify the use of the land we've got in the city.
Whether it is local government or national and provincial government, the state still owns fair amounts of land, and it's important that that land is used optimally to contribute to spatial transformation.
In terms of the typology, I think it's going to be different than what South Africans and particularly Joburgers are generally used to. I think we're going to see an increase in density, which means a reduction in size.
The question is, how can you start to bring the private and the public sector into a more effective land assembly role, not just for human settlements, but those supporting social amenities we've talked about, the schools, the clinics. How do all these guys start to coordinate their efforts?
And there are huge opportunities. I mean, we can look around us. We see vacant pieces of land. We see pieces of derelict buildings. We can see places where we can go 3 or 4 stories high. We can do a lot to make our city more intense, more exciting, more economically successful through densifying and intensifying.
How do we create a livable space for these millions of city dwellers without driving everyone crazy?
Everyone says that a healthy mind can only exist in a healthy body. Now, the physical environment has a direct bearing on whether our bodies are healthy or not.
For a very long time, we thought just providing a 4-roomed house in some area is the solution. The problem is there's more to it than just a shelter.
It's not just about affordable housing, it's also about how do we create opportunities for small businesses.
The other key component is sufficient social infrastructure. That has a huge bearing on how the family structure functions.
Public space making. How do we create public space making along those developments or those corridors?
And whom should we be looking to as partners for these undertakings?
There's no one stakeholder that can, on its own, achieve spatial transformation.
I think collaborating as partners around the table is essential.
It's about partnership between government and communities. It's about partnership between the local state and developers.
Property developers have to come on board. Communities have to come on board. If communities resist this form of densification and intensification, we're going to have a very, very long battle.
We've got to stick with the vision of the city.
So for as long as our plans are not speaking to the needs of the people, then it's as good as not doing anything.
So there are lots of conversations that need to happen amongst different stakeholders in government, but also with the market and with private sectors, with people who use our public transportation, understanding why they use public transportation, why they don't use public transportation, because where people choose to move and live has a direct bearing on what works and what doesn't work.
We have only started to scratch the surface here. These are only some of the relevant issues.
The crime, you know?
Pollution.
Definitely make it cleaner and I'd make it safer.
To stop xenophobia.
I don't feel safe when I'm walking there.
Control traffic in the inner city.
Azenelanga. Because abantu baningi.
Regulate the price of housing.
There are many issues that we have not touched on, but together we need to unravel the complexity of planning for the future while addressing the issues of the past, providing solutions that we can all invest in and implement. Through discourse and interaction, we need to find new ways to solve old problems that deliver a sustainable future for all our diverse peoples. We may not agree on how we plan to get there, but we are unanimous in our commitment to improving the lives of our people.